Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Gareth Vaughan with another of our double shot interviews, and I'm joined by Professor Siah Hwee Ang, who is the BNZ Chair in Business in Asia at Victoria University in Wellington. Welcome in, Siah. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Gareth. Good to see you again.
Now, we're going to talk about China's massive Silk Road economic belt project today. I guess most of us will have heard about the historic Silk Road trading route, but what on earth are the Chinese trying to achieve with this enormous project?
Now, I think if you actually go back to some of the fundamental issues that are actually happening in China, for example, pollution and other things. Now, what you might see is that partially because of the fact that the the development has been centered around the eastern part of China, right? So in many ways, a lot of this pollution comes because the economy is so much concentrated on these major cities, right? As a result of that. And plus, the fact is that if you look at the rest of China and in the west zone of China, now what you will see is actually the whole area of region is actually surrounded by mountains and deserts and so on, right? So it's not different from saying, if you look at New Zealand, there are a lot of places that we can't go into, right, without flying across or trying to build a road across or any train line across is almost impossible. Now it's the same thing approach. I remember when I was traveling in West China, they were trying to flatten the mountains and it doesn't work because it causes even more pollution, right? So what you actually see here is an exercise that tries to rejuvenate the road to the so-called the old Silk Road so that actually the trade from Europe can actually help to pick up the west of China. Right, and that's part of the so-called at least my interpretation of the master plan, because the whole idea is that the east side development is so strong that even though they are extremely strong, they can't help to develop the west side. And of course, when it comes to city developments, it's always hard to ask another city to help other cities along, right? So getting the roads all done to be able to access and help the west of China through trade with Europe and other countries in the west region of China is actually the major exercise that we are dealing with here. And that's why there's a huge investment going on there.
Yeah, look, I mean, the scale of this is enormous. I mean, probably China's the only country that could even contemplate such a project at the moment. Do we know how much money they're spending on it?
Well, the target was always going to be about 40 billion US dollars. That was the initial amount that was put aside for these two projects, and it's called One Road, One Belt, right? Literally the Silk Road and the maritime, 21st century maritime, initiative that they call it. So it's about 40 billion US dollars, but I'm sure there will be more that comes in. It depends on how far this and how quick they want it to be done. And based on my understanding is that they are pretty quick about this, right? And that's because if you look at the reform of China, they just can't wait.
Now, I mean, it obviously goes well beyond China's boundaries too, and through neighbouring countries. I mean, Pakistan is one of the key countries involved. Also, I think into India and through places like Kazakhstan and into the Middle East, even into Africa, and then sea routes across to Greece and Italy. I mean, how are they, I guess, diplomatically, how are the Chinese working this with all these other countries who are part of it?
I think the good news is that China in itself is still a developing country, so it is still sort of in the same boat as the rest of these groups of countries that you have just mentioned. And the matter of fact is that it's now pitched as the sort of the bigger brother among the developing countries, which, presumably because of the way it's designed that these are from the same group, so they trust each other better than to trust a developed country, right? And that's why China has an advantage there, but also China has actually been good enough to actually maintain a good relationship with these neighboring countries like Africa and India and China doesn't deal much in the past, but presumably they know they are the two biggest countries in the world, so they will work more closely in that way. But it's like I say, there are a lot of countries that will try to do the same thing, but it's probably not achievable. But with China, it's probably possible, and they will have to do it. They are very tough countries to deal with, right? In the western side of China, those are very difficult countries from Middle East and so on. But if there's a country that can do it, it's probably going to be China.
What's in it for those countries? I mean, trade opportunities, are they getting infrastructure built as well by the Chinese?
Yes, at the same time, and that's what China has been doing in Africa. So it's almost the kind of things that happened to China in the past, whereby, you know, when they were opening up China and allowing foreign companies to build things in China and make it grow. Now it's the same thing that China has been doing in Africa. So China wants Africa's trade, but at the same time they were the one who actually, or at least for the past 30, 40 years, has been helping to build the infrastructure for Africa, because if there's no road, there's no trade, right? That's the argument there. And it's very simple. If the Africans are not rich enough to build a road, then the Chinese will do it, because the Chinese wants the trade with them. Now, it's the same kind of rules that they are running here. So they actually want trade to happen. And the rest of, if the road actually cuts across this country, it does also means that it also enhances the trade between China and them, and also Europe and them. Right, and that's why you can see these countries becomes the connector, right? And most of them will engage because it's actually a win-win situation.
Now, I mean, we talk about infrastructure, there's roads and railways, and obviously there's sea routes on it as well. We were talking just off camera before we started. You were saying that there's a train now that's running from China all the way to Madrid. Can you tell us a bit more about that? I mean, is that the furthest extent of it?
Yep, I think that's as far as you can get, as far as I know, on road, right? So you have the in the East China, where there's this city called Yiwu, right? So you actually can have a cargo that ships from Yiwu, the east of China, all the way to Madrid, right? My understanding is that that has been tested in November last year, and basically I think the maiden run, as in having cargoes inside there, to have a move that is probably about 21 days, if I don't get my numbers wrong. It's about 21 days all the way through from Yiwu, cutting across 6 countries into Madrid, right? And basically, I think already the first shipment has happened a couple of months ago. So, you know, we're probably going to see more trade like this, but that's not the fastest train, right? So they are looking at ways to actually build bullet trains cutting across, which will actually hasten the process of trade.
It sounds like this project could be sort of ongoing for a long time. Is there a sort of set time frame on when they want to have anything built? Or, as you're saying there, if they're going to introduce faster trains, then this just keeps developing forever, potentially?
Yep, I think if you actually look at the kind of issues that China is facing, right, of course, the faster the merrier, because it does help them to reform internally the unbalanced economy between the East and the West, right? So, you know, based on the understanding of how China wants to get things done, it will be as fast as possible. And, you know, in terms of bullet train and all these railway, they already have the best technology around, right? So they have all those 2 big companies that are in the discussion of a merger as well, that, you know, they have the best bullet train around, the fastest ever get. So they will try to translate these kind of technologies into a cross-country kind of cargo train, right, to allow the trade to even go faster. And of course, over time, it will be interesting to see how that affects the cargo industry in terms of other shipping-wise, as well as the planes-wise. But of course, shipping-wise, we know that they're also doing this 21st century maritime initiative that goes down from the other south side of Earth, right, to go past Singapore and so on through the west side of things. And that's because that's the only way to get around it as well.
I guess that it's a fascinating insight into China's growing influence in the world. I guess just looking at it from the distance of New Zealand, I mean, are there any sort of particular issues for us that we should be, you know, watching or keeping in mind with all of this?
I think I've heard people talking about it, but I don't think as much as we should think about it, because at the end of the day, if you actually look at trade, it's all about the complexity and dynamics of trade between countries. And bear in mind that, you know, maybe in this case we can always have a simple view about China's trade with Europe, but that means quite a lot, because we trade a lot with China, we trade a lot with Europe, right? And if we know that the transportation process or the transportation links in those economies are really open up, that it actually opens up a lot of opportunities for New Zealand products to reach out to those other markets as well. It's not straightforward to say if we trade with China, then what has that link from China to Europe got to do with us? Actually, it got to do a lot with us, because it does allow quicker access as well through the means that we can deal with the Chinese economy as well.
So is it possible that we could one day be shipping or flying New Zealand goods to the east coast of China, and then they go on a train and end up in Madrid or somewhere.
Yep, easily, right? And that's how it can be done. And I think, in some ways, by having the stress that the Chinese government is having in terms of all those reforms and trying to get a more balanced economy, probably in order to make them feel like they are more developed. And we all know that parts of China is already developed, but in order to call themselves a more developed country, right, they have to have a more balanced economy in that way, right? So for that, I think they invest a lot in trying to make it happen. And, there's a lot of benefits for a lot of different countries that are on that road, or the Silk Road, as well as on the maritime one. But at the same time, for us, even though we are far away, right, there's a lot of this other trade that we can actually do, and a lot of links, right, that can be established as a result of others doing the work over there.
That's a fascinating project, and thanks a lot for coming in, Siah.
Thanks,
That's Professor Siah Hwee Ang, who is the BNZ Chair in Business in Asia at Victoria University, and I'm Gareth Vaughan at interest.co.nz.